where creation suddenly articulate with 1,000 tongues to lift one cry. Then from north to south and east to west, we'll hear Christ be magnified. Where the whole earth echoing His eminence, His name would burst from sea to sky, from rivers to the mountain tops. We'll hear Christ be magnified. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let His praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Singing, oh, Christ be magnified. The altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Yeah. When every creature finds its inmost melody, and every human heart is made of pride, and in one entraptured hymn of praise, we'll sing Christ be magnified, be magnified, singing, oh, Christ be magnified. Let His praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Singing, oh, Christ be magnified. The altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Yeah. Oh, be magnified in me. I won't bow down to idols. I'll stand strong and worship you. And if it puts me in the fire, I'll rejoice 'cause you're there too. I won't be formed by feelings. I'll hold fast to what is true. And if the cross brings transformation, I'll be crucified with you. 'Cause death is just a doorway to resurrection life. If I join you in the suffering, then I'll join you when you rise. When you return in glory with all the angels and the saints, my heart will still be singing, my song will be the same. Oh, Christ be magnified. Let His praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Singing, oh, Christ be magnified. The altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Singing, oh, Christ be magnified. Let His praise arise. Christ be magnified in me. Singing, oh, Christ be magnified. The altar of my life. Christ be magnified in me. Yeah.
The cross is my beginning. the sand. It's the end of all my striving. Now I am born again. And there Jesus was forsaken, so I will never be. And His grace is my salvation, the gift of God, the work of Calvary. It is done, it is finished. Christ has won, and He is risen. Grace is here, love has triumphed over death forever. The cross needs no addition, and His mercy is complete, and His love is not in question. The Son of God has spoken over me. It is done, and it is finished. Christ has won, and He is risen. Grace is here, love has triumphed over death forever. Sing this out. Here we go. Strongholds bowing to the Savior, resurrection power over every circumstance, and your word stands final and forever. It will not be shaken. He alone has won it all. Strongholds bowing to the Savior, resurrection power over every circumstance. His word stands final and forever. It will not be shaken. He alone has won it all. It is done, and it is finished. Christ has won, and He is risen. Grace is here, and love has triumphed over death forever. It's done, it is finished. Mercy won, and I'm forgiven. Sing His name, He is worthy of our praise. Jesus, He is worthy of our praise. Oh, we sing His name forever.
Welcome to Life Church Online. thank you for taking the time this morning to worship here with us at Life Church. We exist to be a safe place for people to find and follow Jesus. So thank you so much for taking this time. If it's your first time, or if you've been watching for a while and have never done this, we'd invite you to fill out one of our digital connection cards. And it is really, really simple to do. You can either just take out your phone and scan that QR code there on the screen, or you can actually text the word connect to 407-543-1423. That's 407-543-1423. Thank you for doing that by filling out our digital connection card. We will send you a special gift by email later this week. So again, thank you for joining us this morning and worshiping with us here at Life Church. Also, Life Church, we've made giving really, really easy for you. Thank you for your generosity. We give because we have a give first God. You can also give either by clicking a link below, or you can go to our website at lifechurchhw.com, or you can simply text any amount to 84321. That's text any amount to 84321. Also, one other thing we'd like to talk about this morning, we are only just a few weeks away from a day of thanks. On Saturday, November 14th, we are going to be feeding the homeless in Orlando. And we are so excited about this. But in order for this to be an incredibly successful event, we need your help. Thank you to all of you who've already signed up to help. We still have more slots that are still available. So we'd like you to get online, get on our website, click that registration link, and get on there and sign up to be a part of this. Also, over the next couple weeks, this is what I need you to do, Life Church. I need everyone to be a part of this, to bring one of the food items that we need in order to feed people, or one of the hygiene items. We need you to bring, we need a lot. We're looking for 100 plus people that we are looking to take care of on this day. So would you be a part of this? If you can't be there, or if you can't drop off food, you can simply give and to help towards this event. Just whenever you go to give, just mark that there for the special event fund, and we'll make sure all those funds get to the day of thanks. So thank you for being a part of this. It's going to be an incredible event. What an incredible opportunity for us to love on people. Again, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. Now, this morning, we have another special speaker. Again, I'd like to say thank you for praying for me and for my family. We've been dealing with COVID over the last couple weeks. Everyone's doing great. Everyone's making progress. We're looking forward to this next week, getting past this and getting on with life, and being able to get back and join you there, Life Church Live next Sunday. But today we have our friend, your friend, Stephen Fuller is going to be our speaker this morning. We are so appreciative of Stephen and all that him and his wife Hannah do for Life Church, and how they invest and how they love so well. So I'd like you to sit back, listen up, and allow God to work in your heart through Stephen this morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Wherever you're tuned in from, I'm glad you're here. I hope that you're excited as I am to bring the message today and to see what God has for both of us, basically. As we get into this, I want to start with a good story. It's about a father and a young daughter. And this father takes his daughter to the park, and they're hanging out, just like a daddy-daughter date. Now, I'm not a father, but I've seen these dads run around before, right? You've seen them at the playground. They're out of breath. They're trying to keep up. They don't want to ruin their daughter's day because they're just full of excitement and pure joy. And so he's running around, and instead of canceling the entire day, he needs a break, so he suggests, how about let's take a snack? And so he asks his daughter, hey, would you like to sit down and have a snack together? And that way he doesn't have to admit that he's actually tired. And so they sit down, and earlier that morning he had already prepared a couple of apples for them to have. And he pulls out his sack and he's looking through, and he finds the 2 apples and he holds them both out, one in each hand. And he asks his daughter, hey, which one would you like? And she takes the one from his left hand, and before he could pull the one in the right back, she took that one as well. And she takes a bite out of one, and then she takes a bite out of the other one. Now, it's a weird circumstance, I'd have to admit. And the dad he's starting to wonder, why would she take a bite out of both? And he starts to judge her. He's thinking, who taught her these rude tendencies? Why is she doing this? I brought a snack for each of us, and I even let her pick. And he starts to go through these things in his mind. And before he can continue in his thought process, his daughter holds up one of the apples, and she goes, Daddy, this one is the biggest one, the juiciest one, and the sweetest one, and I want you to have it. You see, isn't it crazy how we can judge someone before we know their true intentions? And that's really what I want to talk about today, is judging people. And it might be a weird topic, right? Because if we're going to talk about judging people, and we're going into probably one of the most happiest times of year, right? We've got Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, we've got family and holidays. You think that this is a time we wouldn't want to judge people, or it wouldn't be prevalent. But I'd have to argue that you're completely wrong. So if you're taking notes this morning, or if you want to keep up, really, I'm just going to call this sermon or this message somewhere in the middle. And you'll understand why we're there later. But hear me out for a second, because if we're going to talk about a time where we give thanks, right? Or where we're serving people, a lot of times we serve the homeless during this time, and we're going to actually get to do that as a church here in November, which is really cool. And we're so excited to see what happens there. And then you've got Christmas, where you get gifts, and you receive gifts, and you give gifts. And it's a happy time of year, it really is. But so much judgment comes with that, right? Like, have you ever helped a homeless person before? I imagine them on the side of the road and they're asking for money, right? Most times I'd say your first thought is, should I just get them food instead? Or maybe a gift card? Because who knows what they'll really spend that money on if I give it to them. Or, hey, I've seen them out here all week. There's no way that they still need money. Or maybe you're giving up your time and you're wondering if it was a waste because the people there aren't actually thankful for you doing that. Or maybe it's gifts, right? Who else here, maybe I'm just the only one, but you've gotten a gift from a family member and you've gone, that's it? Or why is it so small? Or maybe it's the opposite. Why did they give me such a large gift? Or I didn't even ask for that. They know I can't give them anything back. Or they don't have the money for that. How did they get me that gift? All these thoughts are judgment. We're just automatically assuming intent. And we're ruining not only the moment, but we're ruining what their intention is for us. And so this morning, if you're tuned in, I just want to apologize. And I'm going to say I'm sorry, because this subject is not an easy one to go through. And we're going to get to a part where we're going through the Sermon on the Mount. And we're only going through a little bit. This is probably one of the most quoted sermons. It's probably one of the most talked about if you've been around church at all, throughout different churches. And really, it's a couple chapters long. And Jesus is talking to a large group of people. He's up on the Mount. He's got the sea behind him. He's got a lot of people in front of him. He's got a lot of people listening. And the one thing I would ask this morning is that you are just like those people. Come into this sermon, come into this message, and come into today with really just a clear thought process, asking God to show you something new, asking God just to work in your life as you would have if Jesus was speaking to you there. And we're going to get into this, and we're just going to talk about a small part. So if you're with me, we're going to be in Matthew 7, verses 1 and 2, just to get started. Matthew 7, verse 1, do not judge. I think right there we could probably just drop the mic, right? It's something easy. And I thought just a minute ago, Stephen, you were saying that it's going to be something difficult to deal with. But not judging is something, whether you're a Christian or not, is pretty relevant. It's all over the media, it's all over news, it's everywhere. You see it. Don't judge people. It's kind of rude. Stay out of my business, stay out of my life, I'll stay out of yours. We just mind our own things. I can do what I want and you can do what you want. Don't judge. It's simple. And I wish it was that simple. But Jesus says, do not judge, comma. He doesn't put a period there, and that's for a reason. You see, Jesus says, and he's telling everyone, he says, do not judge, or you too will be judged. Okay, well, if you think about that for a second, still not that harsh, right? I mean, it's easy. I already know I'm not supposed to judge people, so of course, I don't want to be judged. I won't judge people. It's a simple fix. And then you get to verse 2, and we start to look into it just a little bit deeper. And Jesus says, "For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And the same measure you use, it will be measured to you." Okay, so don't judge or I'll be judged. And if I do judge, that same measure that I'm judging with will be used against me. Still simple. Anyone here want to know what measures we want to judge with? How about judge not, right? I mean, I don't want to judge. So if I don't judge someone, then I don't have to worry about being judged. And if I don't judge them, then they won't measure that. God won't measure that against me. Well, this is probably the best sermon ever. Stephen, if this is really all that you've got for me this morning, I think I'm in a good spot. And I'd have to say, hold on for just a minute, because that's just the beginning. You see, we get a little more context in the Bible. We get a little bit more understanding of what it means to judge, how we're supposed to judge, who we're supposed to judge. We're looking at John 7, verse 24. Jesus says this. He says, "Stop judging by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly." So if we're going to piece this together, don't judge or you'll be judged, and make sure you understand the measure that you're judging with. But also, stop judging people by appearances, but instead judge correctly. That makes no sense. Judge or don't judge, right? Well, I'm not going to judge people, so why would I judge them correctly? That doesn't make any sense. And what does that even mean? And when we look at this here in John 7:24, Jesus had actually just been judged himself. Isn't that crazy to think that Jesus was judged by other people? The perfect Jesus that we know, the one that committed no sin, the one that walked earth and taught so many and brought so much joy and healed so many, was judged. And in this exact scenario, Jesus is telling them not to judge based on appearance, but to understand the actual situation. You see, in that time, they were judged, or Jesus was being judged based off of a law that was created by the people. If you know anything about creation or how the world was created, in the very beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and we've got this 7-day layout of how things were created and what was created on what days. On the 7th day, we're told that God rested. That's called the Sabbath day, where you're really supposed to just relax and enjoy and take in what God has done. And so the people of that time, they took it in their hands to make a law that's like, don't breathe, don't move, don't work, don't do anything. You can't do anything on the Sabbath. And so Jesus during that time had just healed a man on the Sabbath day. And so they were judging him, saying, "Who are you? You're wrong for doing that. Who do you think you are to heal somebody on the Sabbath day? You must have this wrong." And they began instantly judging him. And it was crazy because even back then there was exceptions to the rules, right? And they made an exception to say, you could actually work on the Sabbath to heal somebody, but only if they're dying. And isn't it crazy that just the one person that Jesus healed in that time wasn't dying? And so he was judged. And so if we're going to look at this and we're going to say, don't judge or be judged, but if you're going to judge, be careful how you're judging them and make sure you do it correctly. Well, what does that even mean? What does correctly look like? And as I told you, we're going to kind of walk through some of this. So let's get a little more perspective into how to judge or what judging correctly is. If you're following along there, 1 Corinthians 5:12 through 13. It says, For what have I to do with judging outsiders? Is it not those inside the church whom you are to judge? God judges those outside. Purge the evil person from among you. This is Paul speaking to the church of Corinth. And Paul is saying, hey, I am a little ashamed of what's going on. Probably not even a little, actually a lot. Like he was grieving with what was happening. Because the church of the Corinth was one of the first churches that he helped start. And he comes back because they're dealing with a sexual sin and immoral sin within their church. And the church is just kind of okay with it. They're sitting back and they're saying, mind your own business. I won't judge you. You don't judge me. Outsiders are like, what's going on in that church? People that aren't Christians are looking at them saying, hey, even we know the sin that's happening there and they're not dealing with it. And the church is like, the people at church are going, don't judge us. You don't know us. It's only one person. It's only a couple people involved. And so they come at Paul and they're asking him for advice on how to handle it. And again, there in verse 12, Paul says, for what have I to do with judging outsiders? Paul is saying the correct way to judge people is to judge within. He says, is it not more those inside the church that you're trying to judge? That's who you should be focused on. Don't focus on those outside. So don't judge or you're going to be judged. And if you're going to judge, make sure you judge correctly. And part of the correct way to do it is knowing who to judge, And that's Christians. You see, Jesus didn't even judge outsiders. You see, as Jesus was going, you could look all throughout examples of the Bible, and the sole purpose that Jesus served was to save. You see, God didn't send Jesus to judge or condemn the world. God sent Jesus to save the world. He sent Jesus to bring the outsiders in. And so many times we look at it wrong or incorrectly. If there's one person that had any shot or opportunity to judge people, it was Jesus. Even at the very end, we get to the part where Jesus is on the cross and he's being crucified. Literally, people are mocking him. They're spitting at him. They have put him up there for something he didn't even do. He was wrongly accused. And in that moment, we get a clear example of what it's like to judge others. And Jesus looks up to heaven. He looks up to his Father. And Jesus goes, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they've done." If there is a time to judge somebody, I think when it's if you're getting crucified for something you didn't do, that's probably a good time to judge people. And even in that moment, Jesus was like, "I don't want you to be judged. I want you to see the love of the Father. I'm not here to hate you. You just don't understand what you're doing." And if we're going to judge those that are inside the church, I think this is really where it's going to hurt us. Because it doesn't stop there. I know some of you probably already looked around this morning or thought of somebody in your head who, definitely needs this sermon. Or someone's like, okay, well, now that Stephen says you can judge inside the church and judge other Christians, I'm going to do that. And so right now you're already judging them, which isn't even fair. But we're going to get to the last part of the Sermon on the Mount that we're talking about. And Jesus is telling them, so he's saying, do not judge. If you do judge, you're going to be judged. Make sure you do it correctly, which is by judging outsiders. And if we're going to judge outsiders, let's understand how we're going to judge them, right? That's only fair because we know we can insiders. We know we can judge insiders, but if we're going to do that, Matthew 7, 3-5, Jesus asks us to do this first. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and you pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll see clearly to remove the speck out of your brother's eye. So Jesus says, it is right to judge other Christians. It's right to judge insiders. And if you're going to do that, you better take that large plank out of your own eye. I've traveled a lot recently. I've been in a wedding and we've traveled for a bachelor party, and I've been on 6 airplanes to be exact. Now, I don't say that to brag. I do love to travel. I'm saying that because if you've traveled before, you'll understand what I'm going to say here. You've got flight attendants at the very beginning, and they kind of spread themselves out, right? About 10 rows apiece, and they start to go over safety instructions. This is the most nerve-wracking part of a flight for me. Not the takeoff, not the turbulence, not the landing. It's the fact that they're addressing you could possibly crash and die. That terrifies me more than anything. I'd rather just ignore it. But when they're talking through some of the safety protocol, they begin to talk about an oxygen mask. And they pull it out and they say it's going to deploy from above. And when it deploys, they give you one very important but simple instruction. They tell you, if you're going to help someone else, you got to put your own mask on first. Now, why is that? That's because if you don't have your mask on and you're not breathing, you're going to be useless. Guys, this morning, I'm here to tell you what Jesus is saying is you're going to be useless spiritually if you're not breathing and looking at yourself first. Guys, we can't judge someone else next to us. We can't judge our friends or other brothers or sisters in Christ or other Christians if we don't first understand what's going on in our own lives. So many times it's funny because the one thing we're trying to judge somebody for is the sin that's very large and probably the largest in our own life. But we're using that person as an example, right? We're putting them out front and we're saying, I hope that you are noticed and not me. And Jesus is saying, you've got it all wrong. You literally have to check yourself first. I want you to come to God. I want you to come and say, search my heart, search my soul. Make sure that I'm not sinning in these areas. God, I want to come clearly. Because if you saw this at all, it's not about judging others. Really what it's about is making sure that your heart is right with God. And so, just a reminder, and I've got this on, I don't know if you can see this rubber band. I don't know if you've ever snapped yourself before with a rubber band, or if you have a really good friend who snapped you on purpose. It stings a little bit. I won't say it hurts. It might depend on how nice your friend is. But it's something that you automatically pay attention to, right? Like if I were to snap this rubber band here, you almost kind of start to like rub it and look at it. And what that does is it diverts your attention from the situation. I don't think I can ever remember what was happening before I got stung. And when you get that rubber band snapped, really what it's doing is it's allowing you to focus on your pain. And so what I would ask for you this week, and you don't have to do this, I'm not forcing you to, find a rubber band, buy a rubber band, they're fairly inexpensive, wear it on your wrist for a week. Anytime you think it's time to judge somebody or you begin to judge somebody, snap that rubber band on your wrist. And the reason I'm asking you to do that is because it will be a reminder that you need to check your heart first before looking at your brother or sister. Check your eyes, see what's going on in your life first. You know, it's easy to understand how we want to help people. But let me put this in an even clearer picture for you. Imagine 3 different bars or 3 different levels, whatever you want to call it. So we've got one here, we've got one in the middle, and one below. At the very top we'll put others, in the middle we'll put God, and at the bottom we'll put ourselves. Now, before you leave and say that I'm putting God below other people, don't leave yet, okay? That's not the point of this. What I'm saying is, think about a time where maybe you knew somebody was running late, right? It was an event you've had planned for a long time, it was really important to you, and they were late. All of a sudden you begin to judge them, right? You're mad, you're frustrated. They had so much time to plan. You can't believe that they would do that to you. This was important. Do they not love you? Are they not considerate of what's happening? But what if we reverse that? What if you were the one that was late? All of a sudden, we don't want to be judged, right? We want it to be, oh my, did they see or did they know that I got pulled over? Did they happen to get the text that I was in a car accident? Did they know that my coffee spilled in my lap and that's why I was late? Why is it that we want everyone to extend a different kind of judgment to us and we hold others to this higher standard? And so the reason I say we've got these 3 bars this morning is because we put people so many times above even the standards that God puts them at. Isn't that crazy to think that we would literally think that people have to act like Jesus? Perfect. Expectations out of this world. And that's higher than what God would expect. But yet we put ourselves so low, we give ourselves so much grace and mercy that we don't expect anything out of ourselves at times. We actually begin to excuse the sin in our lives because we've given ourselves so much grace that we say, God's okay with it. I mean, He's not okay with it, but He'll forgive me. Right? And so we've got this balance and it's all wrong. You see, God's not below their expectations. The issue is we need to bring others down to where God's at. Maybe instead of all the truth and all those high expectations that are unrealistic, maybe we show them a little bit more grace and a little bit mercy and we bring them down to Jesus. And maybe instead of giving ourselves so much grace and mercy, what if we brought a little bit more truth, a little bit more discernment, and a little bit more wisdom? You see, when that happens, then we meet God in the middle, right where God expected us to be anyways. This is the judging we're talking about. I don't know, again, where you're tuning in from. I don't know what you're going through this morning. What I want to tell you is that if we're going to judge others inside the church, once you've checked your heart, immediately all you're going to do is bring others closer to God. Because the end of that verse said not to judge your brother or sister in Christ. It said to take the speck out of their eye. It said to help them. You can see clearly so that you can help them. I don't know anyone that's on the side of the road that's hurting that we're going to be laughing at or making fun of. Why would we do that to someone else in the church that's hurting? I want to bring others closer to God. I want to judge others in a way that's just accountability, in a way that we come to it together. I can say, hey, I've been struggling with this, and I noticed that you were too, but can we help each other out? You see, because when we get to that point, then we can understand that God is the ultimate judge. We get to this verse in 2 Corinthians, and just because if you don't believe me or not, I wanted to point it out. 2 Corinthians 5:10 says, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each of us may receive what is due for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad." It didn't say the final judgment seat of Stephen or Brant, or you can insert your name there. It said the final judgment seat of Christ. Now let's get something right here. We are going to appear before God at some point in our lives, at the end. And we're going to have to give an account for the things that we did. One thing I definitely don't want to have to give an account for is judging and hurting others inside the body of Christ. Aren't we supposed to be working together to win outsiders, to save them and not condemn them? We can't do that if we can't even figure it out on the inside of the church. You see, God's going to judge us And for me, that's all I need to know. I'm not the judge. If I'm going to look at somebody's life, if I want to be a witness to the things that God is going to do in someone's life, I can't be the judge at the same time. I want to close with this story. And it's so relevant and so prevalent to things we're talking about this morning, but really just in general. You see, in World War II, there were a couple of soldiers who were carrying their buddy. It just died. They're searching for a place to bury him, and of course, nearby there's a church. And so they head to the church, and they're looking out, and they see a home right next to it. It was about 6, 7 o'clock probably in the evening. You know, the light was starting to fade. And they knock on the door, and it just happened to be the pastor's home. And they asked the pastor, and they said, "Do you mind if we bury our friend here? We just want him to be buried in the church. He passed away in war. He was killed." The pastor looks at him, and he has to politely decline. He says, "I'm sorry, but you can't bury him in the cemetery back here in the church. This is for our church members only. You can bury your friend outside of the church fence, though, right there outside of the gate." And so obviously the friends were a little disappointed, but they respected the pastor's wishes. They really weren't trying to cause any trouble, but they just wanted to respect their friend's dying wish, and that was to be buried in the church nearby if possible. Now, the next morning, they're packing up, they're leaving the camp, they're moving on in battle, and they decide they want to pay respect to their friend one last time. So they go and they search right outside the fence where they buried their friend. And they're looking, and they can't find him. They're like, "I thought we buried our friend right here." And they didn't want to bother the pastor, but they did. They knocked on his door, and they said, "Pastor, we're sorry to bother you this morning, but we can't find our friend's site. We really just wanted to pay respects to him." And he says, "He's not there." The pastor looks at him and he says, "Your friend is there. You see, last night I had to think about the decision I made to not let you guys bury him inside, to not let him be a part of our church cemetery just because he wasn't a member. I couldn't live with that decision. I judged you guys so much just because you weren't a part of our service in our church. So what I did instead of sleeping last night, and I don't want any recommendation or any accommodation from you, but I went out there and I moved those fences. And your friend is now buried inside of our church cemetery because I couldn't live with that decision." Guys, I don't know this morning who needs to move those fences inside of our church. I don't know who you've judged. I don't know who has been on the outside for so long. I don't know what you're dealing with on the inside, but maybe this morning you're like that pastor and you need to take a look on the inside at a decision you've made against someone, whether it's inside the church or not, and you need to come clean with yourself. You need to ask God to check your heart. Look, all I'm saying is if we're going to judge people correctly, instead of a pandemic, we'd be talking about a revival across the world. This is something that if we can understand how to judge one another, it will revolutionize not only the way that church is done, but the way that people see Christians, the way that people see the church. Guys, I would ask that you just pray with me this morning. God, I am praying for that guy, that girl, that man, that woman, whoever's sitting there, who's watching right now. First of all, just thank you for letting them tune in this morning. God, my prayer is that we would expand the church fences, that we'd expand the church wall, that if we're going to judge, God, that we judge correctly, but that starts with ourselves. God, I pray that you search my heart. God, I pray that as we get better together, we expand and we see others and they see Christians in the church in a light they've never seen it before. God, I pray that we are not judging others like the world is judging them. The world is judging in so many different ways and the word's almost changed. God, I pray that you just use us in a new light. In Jesus' name, amen.